Hi, and welcome to your next lecture in Computer Science for Everyone. This time let's talk about data types. In the last video, we saw how we could create variables inside or outside our methods. So let's have a look at what type of variables we can create apart from integer variables. Data types is just that, a type of data. But what sort of data can be stored in our variables? Well, let's take a look at the data types, the names that we use in Java to define the type. What can they store? And give an example of a data type. The first one is a string. String is just a concatenation or a group of characters that are grouped together, essentially. For example, the words hello world and the comma and the exclamation mark all together. Between quotation marks, they make up a string in Java. The obvious one we've seen already is int, which is an integer, a whole number. For example, 5, 16, 18,956. The next one is long. Long is just that. It's just a long number. It's a long whole number. For example, 1.8 times 10 to the 19 or 1 or any other value. The interesting thing about longs versus ints is that a long can store a lot more numbers. An integer can only store up to 2 to the power of 31, whereas long can store up to 2 to the power of 63, which is a lot more. You don't really have to worry about the range. Most of the time, you will use integers. Then we have float. Float is a floating point number, such as 1.56 or 0.01. And then, just as long is to int, double is to float. So double is a double precision floating point number. It's essentially float, but longer. Most of the time, actually, we use doubles instead of floats. So we use mostly strings, ints, and doubles. Then we have char. Char is just like a string with one character. So for example, A, B, or C. And then we have arguably the most important type of all, which is Boolean. Boolean is a true or false value. So a Boolean can only have two states, true or false. As we've seen in the previous section, it's 1 or 0. 1 stands for true, 0 stands for false. So Boolean is the same thing, true or false. And finally, we have one last type that we've seen in the video, and you might have wondered what it was, and that is void. Void is not a variable data type. It is only used in methods, and it means nothing. We will come in to see what this means when we talk about methods returning values. You don't have to worry about this for now, but just know that void means no value. So overall, we have string, int, double, char, and Boolean as our main data types. And we have long and float as data types we do not use that often. And void is only used in methods. This table is going to be really important for you for the first couple weeks. Let's have a look at some examples in code. So the obvious example here is we have void in our method. We have a string that we call hi, and it equals the words hello world with a comma and an exclamation mark, and we have a semicolon at the end. We have int a, which is an integer, is 55. Integer b is 156. C is a plus b. So we can do this. We can define two variables and just say another variable is the addition of those two. Or we could do a plus 55 or something like that. Then we have double x is 15.567. Float, I'm calling it my float, and it's 96.7f. In order to distinguish between doubles and floats, we put the f at the end of float data types. Maybe this is why they're not used that often. I'm not sure, but just notice that you won't be using floats very often. Most of the time you will use doubles if you want to work with decimal places. Then we have char. We've called it new line, and we've said this character is \n. You will come across this in programming quite a lot. \n is actually only one character. But we could have said char new line equals A or B or C, and notice the single quotation marks around the character. This is, single quotation marks are used for character data types, whereas double quotation marks are used for strings. Then we have a boolean called has finished, and it equals false, and then we change its value to true. This is an interesting concept here that I haven't explained yet, but I thought was maybe self-explanatory, and maybe you could just understand it from seeing it. But if we have a data type, we are creating a new variable. So boolean has finished equals false, create a new variable called has finished of type boolean. If we skip the boolean, we assume we already have this variable created, and we're simply changing its value. So in all of these cases up to here, we are creating new variables. In this last line, we are only changing the value of a variable we've already created because we don't have the boolean at the front. Finally, void is only used in methods such as here. I've skipped the data type long because it is not very used. It would just be long x equals any whole number. I understand this is quite a lot of information. Know that you don't have to know them all by heart right now. Get that table printed out. It will be in the download section at the right of this video. So get it printed out, or make sure you've got it in your computer so you can take a look at it. And you won't need to know them all by heart. Eventually, after a couple of weeks, you will already know them all because you will have used them a few times. Okay, so this is what we need. String, int, double, and boolean. The others, you can pretty much forget about them for now. So string hi is hello world, int a is 55, double x 15.567, boolean has finished equals false. These 4 data types are the ones that we're going to be using the most. So make sure that you at least recognize these. String is just a set of characters. Int is a whole number as depicted by the name integer. Double is a double precision floating point number, and it has a decimal place. And a boolean is just a true or false value. Okay, so hopefully this wasn't too complicated. I'm sure you're just managing just fine. Let's move on to the next lecture, where we'll dive deeper into Java programming. So stick with me. I'll see you in the next one.